Hi, and welcome to CryptoLaw. I am Jeremy Hogan, and we are live. I have hijacked the channel for one last day, but I know why you are here because you are interested in XRP and want to know what's about to happen in the SEC lawsuit case, and I am about to tell you. And then we are going to speculate on the outcome, all just for fun and all within 15 minutes. Promise. So first, I'm going to let you in on a little lawyer secret, and that's that as a lawyer, sometimes you win because you are a great lawyer or you have a great client, and sometimes you win, well, let's just say you just get lucky. And Ripple has had a lot of luck on its side, and I know you might not think so, but the very first thing was the luck in randomly drawing this young lady, Judge Torres, as the judge in Ripple's case. I think we have a nice picture of her. There she is, Judge Torres. Now, if you recall, the SEC was pretty much getting, every case 100%. It was batting 1,000. That's 100% for you non-baseball countries out there. And the SEC had never lost a crypto case before. And with some of these judges up in New York, I think they absolutely would have lost the case if they had been in front of some of these judges. I can think of 2 or 3 of them. And instead, Ripple won on about 2/3 of the case against it. Now, a lot of that was luck, if we're being honest. But then, and this is what we're going to be talking about today, something happened at the end of October last year, which I'm going to call the immaculate conception of case law. Last year, a case came out of the second DCA court called the Govil case, and it was literally a godsend for Ripple. Actually, right after the case came out, Ripple's legal team held a special meeting to discuss the Govil case, and they invited little old me to attend. I took some video of it, and here it is. That was Alderati conducting, by the way. But the point is that the Govil case causes a big problem for the SEC, and it came out right at the perfect time. Amazing timing. So let's get into that and talk about the Govil case, the injunctions, the remedies, and what's going on in the Ripple case. And then at the end, we're going to talk about what I think is going to happen. Now, to rehash where the case is at, Judge Torres said that only Ripple's past sales to institutional buyers were sales of security. That's all. And now we are at the place where the judge will have to say what happens to Ripple for violating the law on those sales. And there are 3 things that the SEC wants. It wants an injunction against any further violations. It wants money, which is called disgorgement. And 3, it wants money in the form of a penalty. Now, we know exactly what the SEC wants and how much because it actually submitted a proposed order to the judge telling us exactly what it wants. And so let's take a quick look at the SEC's proposed judgment. There it is. Okay. So as you can see, and we're going to quote here from it, and this is a proposed judgment. The judge isn't signing off on it. This is just the SEC saying what it wants. It says that it wants, pursuant to Section 21, it wants the defendant to be permanently restrained and enjoined from directly or indirectly conducting an unregistered offering of institutional sales. And then later down in its order, it says that it wants, this would be part 2. It wants it to be ordered that defendant is liable for disgorgement of $876 million and change, representing net profits gained as a result of its violations of Section 5 of the Securities Act as found in the court's summary judgment order, together with prejudgment interest thereon in the amount of $198 million and change, and a civil penalty in the amount of $876 million pursuant to Section 20D, blah, blah, blah. Defendant shall satisfy this obligation by paying $1,950 million to the SEC within 30 days after entry of this final judgment. Wow, that's it. That's everything that the SEC wants. It wants an order from the court that Ripple can't break the law by selling to institutions, and it wants money. It wants a lot of money, about $1.95 billion with a B. Now, as far as the injunction, to me, it's kind of meaningless to get an order from a court saying you can't break the law again. It's kind of redundant and pointless. But for Ripple, this is actually a big problem. And so when you look at its brief, it takes a lot of time to address this. And that problem has to do with ODL sales of XRP. Now, the legal issue being addressed is whether Ripple is likely to continue violating the law if there's no injunction issued. That's why the SEC, in its initial brief, spent so much time talking about how Ripple celebrated the win and acted as though it was going to act in disregard of the law. I think the SEC attached something like 30 pages of Twitter posts talking about the ruling, and it included that as evidence to the court. There was one picture in there, though, that they forgot to put in, and that was Brad Garlinghouse's picture with the two biggest, wild, crazy party animals ever. And here is that picture, which they forgot to put in. That was at the Ripple Proper Party, and we had just done like 10 lines of coke and talked about how Ripple was going to continue violating securities laws. Just kidding about the violations of law. In any case, from a legal standpoint, there's not much to discuss about the injunction, and that's because a lot of the injunction stuff is left up to the discretion of the judge. But it's very important for Ripple because it doesn't want its sales of XRP for its on-demand liquidity product to kind of be lumped into the injunction. That would be a big problem for it. So Ripple focuses on trying to get the judge to kind of carve out those sales from any potential injunction by arguing that those sales cannot be sales of securities and shouldn't have been included in the institutional sales from the beginning. Let's take a look at that on page 7 of its brief. Quote, ODL buyers hold purchased XRP for mere seconds. Ripple's ODL contracts protect buyers from losses and prevent them from earning profits due to even momentary volatility in the price of XRP. They buy XRP solely to use for ODL transactions. ODL contracts do not contain provisions that this court has found to show an intent to invest, such as lockup periods, resale restrictions, and discounts. Now, reading that, I think Ripple has a very strong argument here, but the problem is that the judge apparently lumped ODL sales in with the institutional sales in her summary judgment order, and sometimes it's hard at the remedy stage to kind of get it unlumped. So the SEC will be filing one more brief in a couple of weeks, and I think that would be the issue to watch out for. How strongly does the SEC fight to keep ODL sales in the injunction? An injunction against using XRP as a bridge currency obviously affects Ripple's business and would be bad in business terms. But enough of that. Let's talk about, I think, where the heart of this issue is, and that's about money. Okay, and in that case, it's called disgorgement. And I think the SEC's main ask here is for over $1 billion of disgorgement, meaning it wants Ripple to pay back all the money it made from its institutional sales of XRP plus interest. That's over $1 billion. And that ask would have been an easy reach up until October of last year and the birth of the Govel case, or Govel case, I don't know how you say it. And here's what the Govel case says per Ripple. Let's look at its brief on page 18, I believe. There it is. Quote, the SEC has failed to show that it should obtain the equitable monetary remedy of disgorgement under Liu v. SEC and SEC v. Govel. Liu held that SEC's disgorgement remedy is subject to the restrictions of equity jurisprudence. Among other restrictions, disgorgement must be awarded for victims, and the SEC can obtain disgorgement only of a defendant's net profits after deducting legitimate expenses. Govel further held that an investor is not a victim for equitable purposes if he suffered no pecuniary harm. Accordingly, the SEC must show that investors suffered pecuniary harm as a predicate for a disgorgement remedy. Now let's think about that again. Now, under Govel, which is binding second DCA case authority, the New York court is under the second DCA, so whatever it says, they have to follow. The SEC must show that institutional XRP purchasers lost money on their purchases of XRP in order for Ripple to even have to pay 1 penny back. And that's a case that came out last year in October, and that's a humongous problem for the SEC because, in general, the price of XRP has gone up over time. You know, if someone bought 1 million XRP for 2 cents back in let's say 2016 or 2017 or whenever it was that price, and they sold it for 10 cents in 2019, no one lost any money. They actually made money. So To try and counter Goville, the SEC is therefore left with kind of a strained analysis as to how purchasers lost money. And let's take a look at page 20 of Ripple's brief, because that's where it describes that part of the SEC's argument. And here's what it says, quote, "The SEC asserts that some institutional buyers suffered pecuniary harm because they did not receive undisclosed discounts Ripple offered to other buyers. To be clear, there is no argument that the discounts themselves were unlawful. Instead, the SEC contends that if Ripple had disclosed the discounts it had offered some buyers, other buyers could have demanded and potentially paid lower prices. That argument is speculative on its face, both as to the disclosures that would have been required and the effect of those disclosures if made. That is why the SEC must say potentially." It's also the same argument that the Second Circuit rejected in Goville, that the loss of a right to make informed decisions equates to pecuniary harm. After all, the investors whom Goville defrauded certainly would have paid less and might well not have invested at all had they known he was misappropriating their funds. But the Second Circuit has squarely held that such an injury does not support disgorgement where an investor has received the return that was contemplated. The institutional buyers received just that. Oh boy. All right. Well, that, my friends, is a very strong argument, which was born from a lucky star last year on October 31st, and which allows Ripple to summarize in its brief as follows. Let's take a look at page 30, I think. Quote, "Taking both discretionary and comparative factors into account, an appropriate civil penalty would be no more than $10 million. That would reflect about, that would reflect about blank, because it's redacted, of Ripple's actual gross revenues from pre-complaint institutional sales, and would be proportionate in both percentage and dollar amount to comparable digital asset cases where there was no culpable mental state and no substantial risk of harm or risk of harm to others." So there you have it. Under Goville, well, before Goville, the SEC was requesting $1.95 billion, and Ripple says not only should there be no injunction, it should only have to pay $10 million in total because no one was harmed. They can't prove any harm to the investors or to the purchasers. And also $10 million would be a reasonable penalty based upon past penalties. So, and that brings us to my favorite part, which is speculation and conclusion. And this is where I get to talk about what I think is going to happen. And let's give it a shot. Hell, I don't know what's going to happen, but you never know. Sometimes I get these things right. So as far as the injunction, I think the judge grants and gives an injunction against future institutional sales of XRP against Ripple. I do think she will carve out an exception for ODL sales unless the SEC can really knock it out of the park on that issue when it replies in May. I think that's on May 6th. So I think on this issue, I'm going to call it a draw. I think SEC is going to get some of what they want, but Ripple's going to get what it wants. I think that we're going to see Judge Torres probably try to split the baby, if I had to be honest, because this is what we've seen her do in the past. And I think that was a smart move on the part of the SEC to ask for $2 billion, because if you're dealing with a judge that likes to split the baby, the natural thing, the logical thing to do is ask for a lot of money or to ask for very little money, because you're generally thinking, okay, well, if we ask for $2 billion, maybe we'll get $1 billion. Now, the problem I have is that the SEC's argument in light of the Goville case is very speculative. And maybe most importantly, the SEC just can't show actual losses to the purchasers. It can say and show that purchasers could have lost money, but it doesn't look like it can produce facts that show actual losses of money. And, as kids say, goes with the courts, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? So we need facts in court, and I don't see any facts yet about actual losses of money. So based on that, it's going to be very difficult for the judge to craft any sort of ruling that would hold up to an appeal. So I guess what I'm saying is I just don't see how the judge is going to draft an order with any disgorgement in it unless the SEC can kind of pull off a little minor miracle in its final brief. And therefore, if, absent that, I am saying that the judge will order zero disgorgement, but throws the SEC a bone and orders Ripple to pay $100 million penalty. Because why not? Just a nice round number. So I would say that based on what we've seen so far in the case, that the final judgment will come out this summer. I'm guessing July, maybe August. And then whatever the ruling, I think both sides file notices of appeal, and the case heads up to the DCA appeals court and is ruled on next year. Now, I wouldn't appeal it if I was the SEC because bad facts make bad law, but that's just me. I don't know if the SEC can just let this go. Everything seems very personal to them. And anyway, that's my call. $100 million and an injunction as to the institutional sales. We'll see if I hit the bullseye or if I'm way off target. And finally, allow me to take a personal moment to say happy birthday to my wife, who I think we have a picture of somewhere. She would be the one in the middle, if we got the right picture. No picture? There she is. Okay. All right. No, not Marilyn Monroe, not Charlie Chaplin. My wife is in the middle. And I'm not going to tell you how old she is, but let me just say that I met her when she was 23, and I've now known her for more than half of her life. She's my wife, law partner, mother of my children, the most intensely family-focused person I've ever met, and she's an amazing woman. Happy birthday, love. And that's it. That's it. We're almost done. Sometime this summer, we're going to get a final judgment, and we'll go from there. I'd like to thank you for watching. I'd also like to thank the amazing CryptoLaw staff for helping me do this. They have some amazing stuff coming up about the SEC and enforcement in general next week. So keep an eye out for those and keep an eye out and watch them. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Peace out.